When in 1984, Philip Potter left his office as General Secretary, a group of friends and colleagues wanted to express their gratitude for the creative and inspiring years together by organizing a small symposium in his honor. We felt that the title Cultures in Dialogue was particularly fitting to characterize a central thrust of Philip's ecumenical service. At the end of the symposium, Philip confirmed the choice of the title by referring to his own personal experience. He said, "I happen to come from an area where probably the earliest intensive and somewhat violent meeting of cultures took place. I contain in my own self many cultures, from Mongolian, which the Arabs were, all the way to Africa with Europe in between. I contain within my own self oppressed and oppressors, white and black and yellow. Therefore, this dialogue of cultures has been going on inside me all my life. It has not been difficult for me to be conscious of both the tensions and the marvelous privilege of sharing so much of humanity. I have not seen the meeting of cultures as a threat, but as a promise." This has remained his basic attitude during the more than 50 years of his ecumenical service, and has led him to become an active promoter of the dialogical approach to cultural diversity. During Philip's time, first as director of the Commission on World Mission and Evangelism, and then as General Secretary, the WCC had initiated a program on interreligious dialogue. This initiative was viewed with reservation and criticism, particularly among the traditional mission churches, because of the fear of syncretism. Philip felt that they were being misled by a narrow, primarily intellectual understanding of dialogue. Therefore, he pointed to Martin Buber's interpretation of dialogue. In the famous book, I and Thou, Buber speaks of dialogue as an attitude of mutual respect, mutual caring, the sharing of life with life. And Philip explained, in the encounter between the I and the Thou, it is the and that is the important factor, the presence of the Spirit, which works with those involved in the dialogue. What therefore characterizes a genuine dialogue of cultures, according to Philip, is this encounter between persons in openness and mutual respect from the depth of their existence. He acknowledged that there is a tendency nowadays to regard the meeting of cultures, including theologies, as a source of division and conflict. But he adds, I have discovered that with humility, imagination, humor, and courage, this meeting of cultures is in fact the only hope for humankind to attain the fullness of life in all its shared diversity in the Christ who contains and holds all things together. For Philip, dialogue of cultures describes the internal dynamic of the ecumenical movement, and at the same time serves to widen its scope beyond the focus on church unity. In his first report as General Secretary to Central Committee in 1973, he strongly affirmed the conviction that the term ecumenical did not only refer to the coming and being together of churches, but more biblically to the whole inhabited earth of men and women struggling to become what they are intended to be in the purpose of God. The ecumenical movement is thus seen to be wherever Christians and others are one way or another seeking to work for the unity of mankind. Thus, the search for the unity of the Church is inextricably bound up with the struggle for the unity of mankind. And the dialogue for cultures for Philip unfolds the abstract notion of the unity of mankind. One area where this dialogical understanding of the internal dynamic of the ecumenical movement comes to the test is the discussion about issues of doctrine and theology. From his involvement in the missionary movement, Philip was aware from early on that cultural identity does shape the proclamation of the gospel. As the Bangkok Conference on World Mission and Evangelism stated, culture shapes the human voice that answers the voice of Christ. It was therefore evident for him that the Western church tradition represented only one expression of the Christian faith. The ecumenical movement should therefore create the space and the atmosphere where different culturally contextual expressions of the faith could encounter, enrich, and also correct each other. In a lecture entitled Experiencing God in the Dialogue Between Cultures, held at the University of Tübingen in 1976, Philip Potter pointed to the intimate link between theology and culture. Doing theology means to reflect about the experience of God. This becomes credible only as long as we embrace with our whole being God's work in our particular culture. After having reviewed the emergence of contextual theologies in North America, Africa, Latin America, and Asia, he concludes his presentation of culturally conditioned reflections on the experience of God with the statement that only the readiness to enter into this dialogue of cultures can reveal to us the fullness of God's grace and wisdom.